Welcome everyone, and first and foremost I just want to say basically every single one of these shells has a best in slot partner, right? One unit that is using that shell for sure. So if you want to know more about that shell, I highly recommend you to listening me talking about each of these shells and their partners and who they are good for, as just looking at the tiers won't help you to know on who these shells actually are good for, because they're very specific, right? But overall there are definitely some stronger shells and there are some weaker shells overall. Some shells that have multiple units that are exceptional with them, and then now there are some shells that are kind of iffy. So let's go right into it with some of the best shells in the game, shall we? So starting off with the S tier is going to be Codex of Magic. Codex of Magic is has been nerfed, but it's still S tier for sure. It's only been nerfed for turn 2, that said. Turn 2 didn't use that many Codex of Magics anyways. It was mainly the control players and the cleavers that wanted to use Codex of Magic, and they still can do so. They don't really need more than that many ults. You know, you just cycle the ults once and then cycle them again. And if you're not able to kill your opponent within that time, then you're at the back foot anyways with that. So the Codex of Magic, mainly a turn 2 nerf, mainly affecting the likes of a Veronica or maybe a Doki Doki and Linglo that could have went for a Codex of Magic, but even then only the Veronica was like the one that really wanted the Codex of Magic at the end of the season. But it's still best in slot for so many units like cleavers and control players. They just want multiple Codex of Magics built. And even Veronica, like I said, she can still use it, and I think it's just an exceptional shell and it's easily S tier. And the other partner to it is going to be the Jackal Guard. Now for many units, if you're an aggressive cleave control player, you're going to go Codex of Magic. For example, on a Plume you can go Codex of Magic. But if you're more of a turn 2 player or more of a standard player, you're going to go with the Jackal Guard. The cycling of the Jackal Guard is super good, and even though the Plume release has semi-nerfed the Jackal Guard a little bit, because quite frankly Plume can just strip the Jackal Guard speed buff, which is why some units that used to run the Jackal Guard now swap back to some other shells that they used to run back in the days. But overall it's still super good for so many units. I'm talking Plume, even Holden can still use it. You can think about maybe putting it on Giada, you can put it on healers, you can put it on control units for turn 2 such as Mio. There's still so many use cases for the Jackal Guard, and I'm still in the Hoi An mines to this day farming more and more Jackal Guards. The people that seen my account showcase know that I'm still looking for more Swift Smite Jackal Guards, and it's still definitely a S tier unit. But previously I would have said these two are a step above everyone else, but now I think these two are just S tier. And the other S tier shells are going to be the Gigabyte. I'm a big Gigabyte enthusiast. I run it on, it's super good on the healers, it's super good to cut, it's super good for cycling, it has 0 cooldown. I run it even with a raw bulwark. I run it on my Linglo. That's right, even though the Gigabyte doesn't have a bulwark, I just put a bulwark on it and the Gigabyte, because Gigabyte is just that good. It makes your units extremely flexible. But you can also use this on a Lilith, by the way. You can use it on so many units, and this is simply why it's S tier. You can use it on healers, you can use it on Lilith, you can use it to cut against control players, you can use it to cut against Negro player, you can use it for the cycling in a standard game, so you get more turns in. There's so many values that you get from the Gigabyte. It's so flexible for many units, and this is kind of the name of the game for these S tier shells, is that they're either super good on many units or best in slot even in many cases on many units. And this is why, and this is the same for the Gigabyte, it's just extremely potent. And the other one that I would say is going to be into the S tier is going to be the Artisan. Artisan might go down to A tier, maybe, but I think the Artisan is just super solid. Nowadays, especially with the Plume release, the Jackal Guard has seen a little bit of a drop, and even though the Artisan can also be stripped from the Plume, Artisan Strive Holden has now kind of taken over the Jackal Guard Holden. And of course Holden is a super strong unit Rahu is a super strong unit. Mizuki also kind of wants an artisan. So many of these strong defense scalers, they just like to have an artisan. And because they are so strong and the artisan is so strong, this is why it gets you to S tier. And the value of this shell is definitely insane, especially if you're running also an aggro comp and you don't really run any healers. The artisan will give you a bit of leverage to still survive and still have some longevity in the fight. And just a super good shell. And I think this is probably going to be the last S tier shell. We could consider the Count, but we're gonna put him into A tier. The Count is just the most flexible attack damage DPS shell in the game, because you can just put it on someone and it gives them a big damage steroid. It gives them some lifesteal in some cases as well, but the main user of the Count is definitely going to be the Messiah, one of the best DPS in the game, of course. And the Count with the Messiah, he can just one-tap your Holtons, your Rahus with an attack buff, which is super scary. And that's the Count, which is why the Count is just so good for that. And you can also reuse the Count on other units, right? You can use the Count, like I said, it's super flexible. You can use the Count on a Lilium if you're an aggro player who plays control. If you play cleave, you can use a Count a Lilium. You can also use a Count Batsby. Now, of course, I'm gonna get into both of these units. They both also have some other alternatives, but I just want to highlight the flexibility of the Count with this, and just tell you it has just so much value in so many different cases that it is one of the best shells in the game for DPS for sure, especially if you're more of an aggressive player. So the next one is going to be the Amber. Now the Amber, just for the other best DPS in the game next to the Messiah, is going to be the Tiamat. Best in slot for Tiamat, insanely strong, right? It gives her another leeway, another way of life. The transform interaction with the Amber is just super good. Then I use it personally also on my Lily as well. You can use it also on Beyontins and Co. It's just a very good, very potent shell overall, and one of the better ones, especially because it has such good synergy with some of these meta units in the game. And I think anything else but Amber on the Tiamat is just not the play. If you haven't seen my games against Kecker in one of the tournaments, you've seen exactly why Amber is just best for Tiamat. It's just so good. Then the next one we could put into this tier is going to be, I mean, basically most of these are going to be A tier, right? Most of these are going to be A tier. Maybe these two are a bit better than the other A tiers, but let's go right into some of the other A tiers. Now, next up, we're going to put in the Reaper Steps. Now, I think the Reaper Steps is good, but for other reasons that you might think of. I think for a pure control draft from your opponent, the Reaper Steps can be good, but it can also backfire, because the second your cleanser gets CC'd from your control player on the other side, the Reaper Steps is not going to do anything. That 20% push is not going to do anything, especially control players really like that Mio. And the Mio kind of cooks the Reaper Steps, because first up, she could just push him back, or she can also freeze the Reaper Steps user, and then he can't cycle anyways because of the freeze debuff removing any ability to cycle. So there's that's a bit of the Mio issue. But the reason why I think the Reaper Steps is good is because of Plume specifically. Plume has become a bit of a problem here, especially now with the new changes for the new season, aggro drafts, and the Plume has just become super potent. And if you're not able to cleanse before the enemy DPS goes, the D breaks from Plume, you're in big trouble. So if you have a Reaper Steps on your Ling Luo or your Doki Doki, or in the future, in a few days when Aya comes out, maybe on an Aya as well, to just cleanse your units and push up and cleanse, it will help you, because you really don't want to be hit by some big ultimates while your defense broken. It's just that big of a deal, because even in a turn 2 or a standard match, not turn 2 match, in a standard match where your opponent has something like a Plume plus a Rahu, well, a Rahu ultimate into a defense break, let me tell you, you don't want to experience that. You're just going to be at the back foot so much, or a Lilium ultimate into a defense break, it hurts. So you kind of need to get rid of that defense break or get rid of that unit, and the best way is just to push up and cleanse with that Reaper Steps. And then we have some of the other shells. Actually, I think, reconsidering, I think I might just keep them in A tier. I think I keep them in A tier, and the next ones are going to be B tier shells. I think I'll do that. So, because these ones have still multiple units that they can be used on. Like I said, the cleansers here on the Reaper Steps. You can also use it on some other units, but mainly the cleansers. Lily and Tiamat, Messiah, and basically all other tech DPS can potentially run this account as well. And then we can go for the other shells. And the other shells are basically, let's go into the B tier shells actually. And these are the ones that have basically one best in slot partner, more or less. And starting off actually with the Lighthouse. Now, Lighthouse doesn't really have one best in slot partner, but a few of them. It's the anti-cleave shell per se. The issue with the Lighthouse is if you run it, for example, on a Red Ring, and your opponent has a Messiah that goes first, of course, and you have something like, and they ban the Tiamat, you have Holton as your DPS. It doesn't really matter if the Red Ring pushes up after your Holton died, right? It doesn't matter, because your Holton's gone after one of these Messiah ultimates. And even if she pushes up, you kind of need Strive, because the speed doesn't matter. I tried her on the almost 300 speed with the Lighthouse. She didn't cut. Fast cleavers, you're not going to cut. And even with the Strive, it's very hard to cut. So there's a lot of conditions that need to be met. And on top of that, your opponent, the cleaver, if you're fast enough, for example, with the Red Ring, you still need to hit your debuffs, right, on top of that. So a lot of conditions that need to be met for the Lighthouse. It is still good in some cases, but it can also backfire, and this is why I just have it in B tier for this tier list here. And now we have the Law of Silence. I think the Law of Silence is definitely very good in some cases. I'm talking Law of Silence Messiah has some places if you're playing against the cleaver. Also Law of Silence Lilim, of course, the classic. Then the Law of Silence Shiada unfortunately doesn't really work the way as planned. Maybe it's bugged, maybe they will fix it, but the problem with the Law of Silence Shiada is the Law of Silence buff just doesn't give an extra buff to Shiada for her passive, which kind of is a bit annoying and takes a lot of value out of it, out of the idea of the Law of Silence and the Shiada. And also the Law of Silence has also suffered quite a bit from the Plume release. There's not a game in the high ranks where Plume is not picked or banned. I can guarantee you this much. And if your opponent has a Plume, you have a Law of Silence, a lot of value is already gone from that Law of Silence, isn't it? So this is kind of the issue there with the Law of Silence. Now, another one that we can put in here is going to be the Supernova. Now, the Supernova, honestly, I don't think it's that crazy of shell. That said, the reason why the Supernova is still B tier is because it has such incredible synergy with Fusho. And Fusho is one of the best units in RTA overall. And to be the best in slot shell for one of the best units in the game immediately gives you a lot of value. You need to have that on your Fusho. It's just super good. The synergy with Fusho is just super good. Maybe it will also be not too shabby with some turn 2 Nymphonial shenanigans. I don't know about that, to be honest. Or maybe with the new girl that is coming out with the Aya, you could maybe look at it. But I'm thinking probably Reaper Steps is going to be the play with that on her note. So you push up with the Aya when your opponent goes with the Plume, and then the Aya pushes your entire team up, and you say, "Now I'm the cleaver now," you know. So yeah, but overall, for the Fusho, you definitely want that, right? Then next up, we're gonna have the Golden Lion. Now, Golden Lion has only one user in the game at the moment. That is gonna be the Viper. Outside of the Viper, I don't think there's anyone that uses the Golden Lion, and even with the Viper, I haven't drafted the Viper that much lately, the Golden Lion Viper that much lately, and now that we get more and more bruisers that come into the game, I think DPS or Bruiser Viper might fall a little bit down, whereas the the more of a utility Viper might come back a little bit more from that. We'll have to see, but it's still best in slot for the Viper. Bruiser Viper, Shoddy, FPS Shoddy popularized it, and basically ever since, most of the people just run this on the Viper. You can also run a Jackal Guard on the DPS Viper, but it's just super solid on the Viper. Then we have the buffed Halloween, and the buffed Halloween, I think, is definitely good. We might see it in A tier, but I'm just thinking, you know, Veronica comes to my mind, maybe an Infonial and maybe some other units, but we'll have to see more about from the Halloween so far. Just Veronica as a user is not enough for me to justify to put her into the A tier, the Halloween. And outside of that, we'll have to see how well the Halloween performs now that it's buffed. And for now, gonna be in B tier. Still a good tier, of course. C tier, we only have a few shells in C tier, and these are kind of the ones that you don't really want to mess with. These ones still, like I said, basically all have one best in slot partner. Then we have the Dark Moon. Dark Moon, extremely potent on the Born. That's right. If you've seen some Dark Moon Borns, it's because the Dark Moon proc with Borns in extremely high attack damage is insane. It deals insane amounts of damage, and it's a very good counter to the Law of Silence Liliums as well, because it just deals a nuclear amount of damage to that Lilium that is hiding in the Law of Silence, and then just does another bunch of damage with the Born follow-up with his ultimate. And of course, Born also being buffed. On top of that, I think it's quite underrated from control players. I think you can definitely put in a lot of work with it. And for example, with a Heinrich, I don't see why control players don't play Heinrich on the Dark Moon and full F accuracy. He's not gonna ever miss anything against these anti-CC units. And then they're in prime position to be controlled, basically. So Dark Moon definitely very solid, especially for the likes of the Heinrich, for Born and other control units. And then we have a Revelation. Revelation have been nerfed. There's still some units that can run the Revelation. For example, the Yeli. There's still a few Revelation cleavers out there. That side I haven't really faced many, right? If you see a cleave, it's mostly a Messiah or a Yeli cleave. Now Yeli, of course, with the Revelation, or the Messiah with the Count, but the Messiah is usually stronger than the Yeli. And overall, Revelation suffered a lot. Then the buffed Alicorn is decent. It's not too shabby. You can use it on some units to prevent being controlled. I used it, for example, last season, the full FRES Lilith with a Alicorn, so she would be able to cleanse a few buffs and not take debuffs and not even eat a lot of debuffs, and then just reverse control the controller with it, which is a very nice tech, and it has some use cases. That said, it's still 3 debuffs sometimes can result into you being controlled, and the main issue with the Alicorn is if you put Alicorn on one of these cleansers, let's say you put Alicorn on the Ling Luo, then you sacrifice the Ling Luo's value completely, right? The Ling Luo's value is completely butchered for turn 2 matches, for standard matches, because her value from a Gigabyte is just so much higher, or maybe a Reaper Steps because of the cycling. So you sacrifice a lot, you know? You make a unit that is very specific through it. And because we don't have that many units built so far, we can't really have a unit that is only for that use case at the moment. We're getting there, right? We're getting there, but still it's a bit iffy, right? It's a bit iffy. You kind of want your units to fulfill multiple roles at once. For example, Ling Luo with the Gigabyte can be a cleanser, can also be a standard unit. And also some Ling Luos are also on the Reaper Steps. The thing I'm a bit worried about the Ling Luo Reaper Steps is if you draft the Reaper Steps Ling Luo and the enemy has ult and it just resets the Ling Luo, well, good night then, right? So this is kind of the issue I have there, which is why I use a Bulwark Gigabyte Ling Luo. Then we have these 3 new shells. Now, Ouroboros, I think is likely going to be best in slot for Kokardi. who's gonna come out. I can definitely see it. You're gonna drop it because it has the right matrix effects. It has very good matrix effects. That's the main positive thing about all these new shells from the Khloros boss. And I think Kokardi could probably have this as his best in slot. We'll have to see, of course. But the good thing is it has Bloodbath. It also has Bulwark, so you could run a Bloodbath Bulwark Kokardi in case your opponent thinks, oh, I don't have a Stripper, but I'm just gonna Nahor the Kokardi down. Well, you have Bulwark, and I don't think the Nahor can focus the Kokardi with his S2 and strip it, and then he'll be fine, because the Kokardi doesn't want to be CC'd, of course. And on top of that, it has Kenai, right? Maybe if you don't go that route, you could also build this on the Kokardi with Bloodbath plus Kenai, and have him tanky and deal a lot of damage. I could see that be very efficient on him as well. So this is the way I would say, this is kind of the main unit I'm looking out for this. I think the Holton and the Rahu, they just prefer this. And even the Holton, right, this I don't think is as good as the Shackle Guard. And on the Lilith, that gets the multiple turns. Sure, you get some multiple turns and stack this fast. That said, I think the Lilith's main job is to cycle and keep the enemy team full controlled, and these two are just better to cycle than this, right? This is more damage, but you kind of want to focus on the cycling when you play the Lilith. This is why I mainly see it for the Kokardi probably. And then we have some others. Then we have the Sword 7. Sword 7 is a shell that you can use on Batsby, Cleave. Batsby likes to be together with some control units, and the Sword 7 is then gonna be in prime position to do a lot of bonus damage for your Batsby. Your Batsby is gonna be absolutely nuclear. That's the main issue I have with the Sword 7, and the reason why it's not higher is, first up, it needs a lot of setups. It's very specific, like I said, with the Batsby. And the Batsby could also just run a count and deal a lot of damage. And then he's a bit more flexible in terms of the draft than with the Sword 7. So it's just very specific and kind of hard to draft around. Same can be said with the Tiger Chin. At first I thought, damn, this is going to be insane for Lilium. And it is very good for Lilium, don't get me wrong. But it is kind of random who it focuses. I think it's super good if you run against a Tiamat and you get first turn. The Tiamat, through the damage share, will basically always be the lowest HP unit on the enemy team. And Tiger Chain Lilium will just shred all of Tiamat's HP and make her a non-factor. But it's a very aggressive shell. And like I said, it's similar to Sword 7 as well. You can also run the Lilium on a count if you're playing an aggressive Lilium. Sure, Tiger Chain works as well, but you could also run it on count. And the good thing on the Tiger Chain though is, of course, it has Bloodbath. So if you run an aggressive Lilium that still wants to survive a bit, you have the option to have Bloodbath already on the Tiger Chain and the right matrix effects, which is very nice, of course. And because Law of Silence has been nerfed because of the Plume release, Tiger Chain definitely has its place there with the Lilium mainly as her partner. And then we have these two. Honestly, I think Fortissimo and can I say it? White Fang, I don't see it. I think these two are. I think all of these shells, they have their places. Whereas Fortissimo and White Fang, I just don't see the place in the meta for them. I think there's just better stuff. Maybe Fortissimo, some rare use cases. Maybe White Fang, some niche cheesy builds as well, full speed builds. Same with the Fortissimo, some niche builds, you know. But overall, I just think the other alternatives are better, right? For example, Fortissimo, you can put on some big healers like a Chiaki, which is which you can make then for the Chiaki to just have an insane heal from that. That said, this will remove Chiaki's ability to go, for example, a Lighthouse or a Gigabyte to cycle against Cleave Control, and will lock her in turn 2. And yeah, I'm just not too big a fan of these two. And this is kind of the tier list here. I think I'm very happy with this actually. I think these are basically the meta-defying shells that are just put on so many units and are just super good on so many units and defy play styles. Maybe we could put him down, but I think because the bruisers are just so strong and there's multiple so strong defense scaling bruisers at the moment, I think it's still S tier. And then these are also very good shells in terms of having multiple options where they can go on. And these are the ones that have kind of one best in slot, right? They just kind of have one best in slot ally to be paired up with. And these two, forget about it, right? So this is the tier list. And with that, I wish you all a blessed day. I'm Ronnie. Make sure to like and subscribe. And I'm out. Peace.